It's Joe, your faithful host and co-founder of Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. In case you missed our birthday, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary this summer. That's a long time, especially in tech. That was before Marco, John, and Casey accidentally started a tech podcast. That was before Steve Jobs passed away and left Apple totally rudderless and foundering, never to release another successful product. Back then, we were talking about the brand new Mac Pro. No, not the new brand new Mac Pro, and no, not the one before that, but the one before that. For 10 years, we've been getting together each and every week to bring you epic tales of tech support and business management, and I'm pretty sure we've saved a lot of people a ton of time by sharing our struggles and solutions. We've also spent a ton of time on this show over the years. It takes a huge commitment to keep showing up every week. It takes effort, care, and attention to plan and outline shows, line up interview guests, coordinate our schedules, edit the recordings, post the show notes, and produce the special perks like t-shirts for our patrons. I'm not complaining. I really love doing this, and I'm proud of what we've created. I'm also really grateful for the support we've received from the Apple consulting community, like Adigy, for example. Not only does Adigy make the number one tool we rely on every day to manage our fleets of Macs and support our clients, but they've been a huge supporter of this podcast. We're also supported by Watchman Monitoring and Tidbits Content Network, two more great tools we use to run our businesses. A few dozen other patrons also pledged their monthly support, some of whom have pledged more than $1,000 over the years. Thank you so much. So, all told, how much money do we make on each show? Collectively, the community has spoken, and they've decided these shows are worth about $75 each. So, here's the announcement. We're showing up for our patrons. Starting now, we're shifting our focus to the Patreon community. That means the newest shows will be posted primarily on Patreon. How do you get the latest episodes? Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click on support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the weekly patron-only episodes right in your favorite podcast app. If you already support us on Patreon, log in there to get your special link and subscribe to the patron-only show so you don't miss anything. For now, here on the public show, we're featuring a classic episode hand-selected for you from our catalog of over 500 episodes, along with the occasional new episode. And remember, we're regularly releasing new content on Patreon, where you can join our community of supporters starting at just $15 per month, giving you access to the freshest content. We feature dozens of exclusive shows on Patreon where we speak a little more freely about how we make business decisions, navigate client relationships, manage our employees, and sometimes deal with mistakes and difficulties too. Plus, as a patron, you receive access to our entire back catalog where you can revisit classic episodes and learn from colleagues we've interviewed who've shared their own best practices. Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support to pledge monthly on Patreon. We'd really appreciate your support, and we're confident your business will benefit from the wisdom of the community we've gathered there. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy this classic episode of Command Control Power.
Did you read that article about the voice of Siri? She's now known.
Yeah, she's someone in Atlanta, I think, right?
Yeah, she's a voiceover actor in Atlanta.
That's pretty cool.
And I guess it was a surprise to her that she was Siri when it first came out. Because she did.
Really?
Yeah, I read the whole article. It was pretty funny. She did this voiceover work she never knew what it was going to be used for or anything like that. And then all of a sudden the iPhone came out and people were calling her going, "Isn't this you?" She's like, "Oh my God."
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
That's pretty cool.
That article about the woman who did the Siri voice?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great article.
I thought it was interesting. And they were asking her why she didn't come out and make herself known, because the other series, like in other countries, were known. And she just liked the anonymity and kept to herself. But I thought it was very, very interesting.
So you guys were saying you had some interesting client stories. Who wants to go first?
Oh, there's so many, right? Jerry, you had a couple as well?
I got two, so I'll give you one, and then we could have one of you guys step in and break it up a little bit. So I had a client who I've done a little bit of work for, a residential client. I've been at his house 2 times and pretty much worked on his wife's computer and looked at his iMac a few times, and haven't really done any kind of never had a real good sense of exactly what he was running, except for the general apps that you would expect a normal residential customer to use. So he called me up and he said that he got the new iPhone and he wasn't getting his photographs on his iMac. So he said, I take them with my phone and I don't see the photographs showing up. So I remoted into his computer because I didn't remember what OS he was running. And sure enough, he was running 10.6.8. So I looked at his memory and I looked at his specs on his machine. And I said, well, you can easily upgrade to 10.8 right from 10.6, and you go to the App Store and here's the link you want, and you can do this completely self-guided and the machine will restart and it'll install your OS. So he did that and that all went well for him, and probably five hours later he calls me and he says that he can't open his Quicken files. So I explained to him that, and then I realized that obviously he was running a PowerPC version of Quicken, so I sent him the URL to the Intel version that Intuit rewrote after much furor from the community of Quicken users. And so he paid the $15 and downloaded the Intel version of the Quicken app and went to open his files, and he still couldn't open them. And so it was at that point that I said, well, what version of Quicken were you running on your iMac that was running 10.6 Snow Leopard? And he said, I was running Quicken 2003. So I went, oh,
wah.
All right, yeah. So this is, this is one of those things where, sometimes you make these sort of recommendations for clients very casually, like, oh yeah, just upgrade to the, Mountain Lion and, you're going to get your photographs, and then something else happened. So he was in a panic, and this was over the weekend. And I said, well, don't worry about it. We'll make it work. So I logged into his computer again, and I found his data file, which was only something like 50 megabytes. It wasn't that big, and I emailed to myself. And then I got it on my machine, and I said, okay, how am I going to deal with this? And I have had sitting in a drawer, maybe not using it for a year and a half. And at one point I had an opportunity of selling it, a first-gen MacBook Air with a solid state drive that I got for free from a client who had a cracked screen on it. And she said, I'm just throwing this out. Do you want it? And I said, sure, I'll take it. And I bought a new screen from PowerBookMedic.com. That's my pick of the week. And I did this some time ago, and I put in the new screen, and it was fine. And the machine works great, but of course it's limited in its speed. So I've never really did much with it. And sometimes I had the kids play on it. So pull it out, download a fresh or a install from one of my USB keys, a brand new install of 10.6.8, put that on the machine, get it up and running. And then I went back in my archive and I pulled out a copy of, I didn't have Quicken 2003, but I had Quicken 2006. So I loaded that on, got his file, passed it through 2006. And then I took that converted file and I put it on my machine running an Intel version of Quicken. And sure enough, the file's open. So at that point, I knew I was home free, and remoted back into his computer, emailed him the files, and he was completely relieved and like really, really happy. So I in terms of billing him out, this was a few days later. I said, well, I kind of even though a jury of my peers could look at this and say, oh, you're really not responsible for the fact that, he was running Quicken 2003. I felt a little bit responsible for just advising him to upgrade. So I charged him for an hour of my time. And the bow on the story was he sends me payment immediately, and he doubled the invoice. And he wrote something on the check like, you deserved it. Wow. So it was like, yeah. So, but now it's like that MacBook Air, I'm keeping it. It's now taken a very, very valuable place in my arsenal of tools. It's just always helps to have something like that hanging around, because you never know when you're going to use these things. I have a PowerPC in the basement, and for the times that I have to drag it out. So that's my story.
Yeah, I think you named it. I mean, the PowerPC is a nice one to have, and I think the other one is a 10.6 machine, just in general. I think it's important for consultants to have that kind of stuff in their arsenal, because it's you just need it. Like those those kind of like transitional things. You know, you always have an opportunity to convert something. The one that came up on the ACN alum list recently was AppleWorks opening, in particular, I guess it's database files, I think, are the ones that there's no sort of direct way to open them in any current software. You have to convert them first, you know, save them out, and then you can import them into something current.
That's right. I was reading that as well. Yeah.
So that's always important to be able to do that for a client. But yeah, I always feel that way. Like you were saying, you know, you want to sort of like undercharge because you feel a little bit like like you're partially responsible for something going wrong or being less than an ideal experience. But at the same time, it's like, you know, you can't possibly know. Like you mentioned earlier that you hadn't really done a full evaluation of the system. I mean, you just gave them a quick recommendation based on, you know, what you saw. And that's the same thing Apple would have done, frankly, you know. I mean, we've all seen those, like, or they call Apple and, yeah, the machine meets the specs, go for it, you know, dive in. Or for that matter, you don't check. You just open the App Store and Apple presents you with the upgrade. So, you know, when was it going to tell you that your software is not going to run? So I mean, it's not, yeah, you're right. A jury of your peers would agree with your client and saying you deserve every penny because you know, you couldn't have known. But you know, it occurs to me, like, a lot of clients who see you on a regular basis, who you have like an ongoing relationship with, and they pay you, of course, every time, and they pay for that relationship. They get a better value because you know their system so well, you know, and you're less likely to lead them astray, and it's just going to be a better experience for everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you don't really think about that a lot, but you these clients that you do see regularly, you know those pieces of equipment. I mean, so you can proceed and be a lot more effective in dealing with them and in making recommendations and moving forward. Whereas these sort of unknown sort of shots in the dark, you know, you can really run into a snag or get yourself into trouble. And so, you know, if anything is, what could I have done to sort of avoid that? Well, I probably could have spent more time if I remoted it to his machine and said, you know, I just want to do a little assessment here, and it's going to, you know, maybe take 10 or 15 minutes of my time, but it ultimately will benefit you. So, I mean, that could be something that you might want to consider, given the same set of circumstances if you were in that position.
Yeah. In the end, he knew you worked hard to make it right too. So, you know, that was
yeah. And yeah. So, I mean, you know, again, it had a happy ending, but, you know, it took me a little bit of sleuthing, just a little bit of like, okay, how am I going to do this? And, you know, finding my copy of Quick in 2006, you know. So I've put that in a much more available place. But I was thinking, like, you know, the other thing I thought about after getting done with this job is, like, there's got to be, like, maybe not hundreds, but dozens of other people who might be in the same situation. It's like, you know, how do I find these people and market this, you know?
Yeah. Well, in fact, I think Intuit offers a conversion service. At least, you know, they have in with QuickBooks files going from, you know, some version of QuickBooks for Windows to Mac or the other way around. I know I've used that service for clients before. You know, rather than getting my hands dirty, I'll just, you know, set them up with the rep from Intuit to do the conversion.
Yeah. I've done that with QuickBooks before, never with QuickIn, but I assume obviously they would do that too.
Right.
Yeah, QuickBooks is pretty easy once you have the, you know, right tool or the right program to just pass it through. It just, you know,
right.
Resolved in a couple of minutes.
Speaking of older machines, before I forget, I got a client in the city that has a G5 Xserve that they're looking to sell. If anyone's interested, I
have one of those too at a client locally.
Obviously it would be pickup only, I think. But I don't know how many local listeners we have, but they're trying to get rid of it. And I was doing a security race on it today, and I fired it up, and it was just so freaking loud. Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry. I was apologizing to everyone in the office because I didn't have it in the server closet. I had it outside in the office. Everyone's like, "What the hell is that?" Don't worry.
So how much will they pay me to come and get it again?
I like the way you think, Jerry. Not going to work in this case, but
the disposal fee.
Yeah. Oh, Mike Kingsley offering $5. Now, I don't think that'll cut it, but I'll check with them.
So, Sam, you had a horror story?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, he's a good guy. Like, I'll start with that. It's this client that I have. They're a large organization. They're a school, and they have a bunch of servers. We've been moving out their older X servers and stuff, and moving them into different Mac Mini servers for different services. But they've gotten to the point where they're kind of looking to try and do as much as they can on their own before they call me, because they have IT. They call us to do some of the heavy lifting that they may not have experience in. So they end up getting themselves into trouble doing things like that, where they don't call me till after the fact. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was they had this server that was hosting a bunch of wikis for all the students. And apparently the server started failing, and they thought it was a drive failure. And they saw it was a server with 2 drives. And we had, as Apple recommends, the first drive with all the information, and the second drive was time machined over. So he also had an external clone. So we had a lot of redundancy going on there. Anyway, they don't call us. They try and see if they can troubleshoot it themselves. The drive appears to be failing, so they go take the clone and they say, okay, we have a good clone here. I only have one good working internal drive, and that's the time machine backup drive. So what am I going to do here? I know, I'll erase that drive and restore my clone to it.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, unbelievable, right? So then lo and behold, it won't boot off of the clone. So now he's really screwed. And then I get the call.
Oh my God.
So I was like, what would make you think that's a good idea to erase? I mean, okay, you have a clone, but what about all that history of time machine backups too? Like if you needed something from a few weeks ago or something. Yeah. So it was unbelievable. So anyway, to wrap up this story, it turned out the drive was bad. We got one of our guys, Keith, had gotten the drive to a bootable state, but the wiki services still weren't running. So we had to set up a brand new server. And I had to use the command line to export the wikis and import them into the new server, and point a DNS there and fired it up. And within 2 hours, the wiki server was up and running, and they were loving me. But I was like, don't ever freaking do that again.
Yeah. Step 1, diagnose drive failure. Step 2, erase the backup.
That was unbelievable. I haven't invited him to listen to this podcast yet, because I knew I was telling that story. But
that's unbelievable. That really is.
So you got everything going into that's really impressive, though.
Yeah.
Well,
what version of server were the wikis originally running?
Well, this was all Mountain Lion at this point.
Okay.
But they were. That's interesting though, because all these servers we were moving over were 10.5, 10.6, and 10.7, like a variety of stuff. Mm-hmm. They were running wikis on a 10.6 server, and the plan was, and Apple has a support article to migrate those wikis, to migrate them into 10.8, but it never worked. There was some kind of corruption which we never could figure out, that every time you imported those wikis, it would make the Apache service just fail on the server, and everything would go to crap. So we've had to kind of rebuild those a little bit. And then once we got this to a stable state, he did that, which was not fun.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? I mean, What would make you think to erase your time machine backups?
They were saving money.
Yeah, it's unreal.
I mean, that's like a lot of that client motivation is like, well, it's like, we'll save money. We got this other drive, know?
Right.
And they have a ton of money.
Wow.
That's insane. That's insane. But it's like a worst case scenario for that situation we've all faced, where a client, tries to do it themselves. They just try to do everything as much as possible, or they think, how hard could this be? And I mean, I hate walking into a situation like that. I mean, I don't care if you call me at the beginning and just say like, should I do this or shouldn't I? And I'll tell you if it's like, yeah, no problem. Shouldn't be a problem.
5-minute phone call.
Yeah, exactly. Save you all that time, save me the aggravation and like the fear that that you might be screwed,
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'll say this now, by the way, I won't say his name, but if I ever invite you to listen to this podcast and you listen back to this episode, I apologize for bringing you up on air.
Well, I think a client, in that situation probably would feel, would have sort of learned their lesson, and I don't think they'd mind sharing that lesson publicly,
Yeah, they were appreciative. I mean, it all went in the end, we were fortunate, but still, that was no good.
Yeah,
Even on a much lower level, I mean, just speaking to that general sort of thought process of the client. I had a client call me up. They're running Mountain Lion Server, and she's the office administrator, and she said, I got this, 10.5 server update. Should I do it? And I'm like, well, we could do it for you, but there hasn't been problems. So she did the update, and all of a sudden she couldn't authenticate. All her calendars were failing with authentication. She couldn't reach the file sharing. And so we're exchanging email back and forth. And I said, well, something may have happened with the Open Directory. So then I get this email. Well, why is this happening? Maybe we should consider another, not me specifically, they're not talking about like Mac service, but they're saying maybe we should consider some other, service here instead of using this Mac server. And I wrote her back, and I'm like, in a very nice way, I said, look, this is we're on a break-fix model here, and all this stuff you're doing, and I support you doing things self-guided, but you're going to have to understand that you're not on any kind of regular server maintenance contract with me, and if you were, you wouldn't have had this problem, and now we have to fix it. And ultimately, it got fixed. We didn't have to rebuild the Open Directory or anything like that, but. The knee-jerk reaction was, well, something's wrong with this system because I just can't press the restart button and all of a sudden everything, my calendaring doesn't start working and my file sharing doesn't start working again.
Yeah. Yeah, when a client has that much sort of control or, like you said, self-guided guidance over their own systems, well, the first thing that comes to mind is all bets are off. We don't know what's changed between our last visit and now. And, and we're coming into this scenario sort of blind, and we have to sort of, examine it and just figure it out from scratch. A lot of clients get the idea well, I can do most of this myself, and maybe they're successful in a lot of things, but if we don't do each step ourselves, we don't really know what was done and which steps were skipped that now have implications.
Right.
So it's all bets are off. And again, it speaks to the value of a client actually just engaging our services on an ongoing basis, where we just have sort of this passive insight into the system, rather than just coming in when something truly goes wrong and having to just interrogate the client. When did this happen, or when was this piece of equipment installed, or this upgrade done, or do you remember changing this setting? And of course they don't remember, right? I mean, they're not taking notes. Each appointment I have a list of just things that I did, and I can do a search, find the client name in iCal, and figure out what I did and when I did it. Whereas with a client doing the self-guided route, they're just kind of just flying by the seat of their pants. And a lot of times there aren't any notes, and we don't know when and how things changed. So.
Yeah, you brought up this point before, Joe. And then the other thing is that, so you're trying to resolve this issue, and then you look at some of their systems and you realize that the backup hasn't been running for 23 days. And so you don't even have anything to fall back on. Whereas if you had some sort of regularly scheduled program with these clients, at least, you have some working systems that you can sort of fall back on if in fact you had to rebuild or had to really sort of roll up your sleeves and really do a deep dive. But like you say, when they're on this just self-guided path, and they're so incredulous. I mean, they're so well, we can't have this. They're so this is preposterous. Right. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
And how do you tell them nicely? It's and I have these. They're almost like I could use them as text expander, snippets. Unfortunately, when we presented to you the opportunity to do an ongoing maintenance server, with your Mountain Lion server, you declined, and ultimately, had you been on a different track, this may not have happened.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I feel like I spent a lot of effort, wording those kinds of things in a very nice way, not pointing fingers, but just sort of I had one recently where this all played out actually over the last few months, but a client that I first started working with about maybe a year ago or something like that, close to a year ago. I came in and she had a few Macs in the house, and one was her main machine, the MacBook Air, and each maybe a couple for each of the kids, and one kind of like iMac in the sunroom or something like that, and none of them were backed up. And I said, you really need like a time capsule. It'll be perfect for you. You have airport extremes on your network. We would just basically configure this to either extend the network or just kind of plug in and sit there in bridge mode and just act as a backup destination for all the machines. Plug one of these in, you can get a backup of all your machines. Full backup. Benefit is, you can literally just start from zero. Your machine could fall into the pool and you come home from the Apple store with a brand new machine, and we get you back up and running in a matter of hours. It makes it really simple. I like I tell every client, it's like a no-brainer. You've got to have a time machine backup. And she said, well, I have Mozy or I have Carbonite or one of these. I forget what it was. And I said, that's great. That's an offsite backup. That protects you. But it doesn't make it easy to restore from like do a bare metal restore, to restore from a failure of a hard drive or something like that. So you really should have a time machine backup. It's really important, well, I don't think I'll do that. And of course it's a client that it's not a financial thing. It's more like she didn't sort of trust me yet. I was a new consultant trying to sell her something and she was a little skeptical and that kind of thing. And I don't get that a lot. Most of my clients take, are pretty, take my word for it, and they're pretty trusting, and we have good rapport from the start. And she was a little bit of an exception. And I said, okay, well, I've done my best. I really wish you would have a time machine backup, but that's okay. It's up to you, And sure enough, it was I can't believe this happened, but it was like I want to say like 4 or 5 months later, she calls me up and she says, my computer stopped working. I spilled water on it, my MacBook Air. And it won't start up. And I said, shut it down. Fast forward. So I said, we can recover the data. We can pull the SSD module out. We can try and recover your data. We can do our best. There's no promises, but bring it in and we'll do our best. Well, isn't that why I have Mozy? Well, okay. Well, you could try it that way. It's really going to take a long time to like recover your data over the internet, like literally like weeks or maybe longer. But, we can try it that way. Well, I'm just going to do that. Okay, fine. So she like comes home with a new computer, starts the process. Time goes by, she gets most of like the easy data back, and then the iPhoto is going to take a lot longer and that kind of thing. So she finally gets like more or less everything restored and things reinstalled and reconfigured and yada, yada, yada. And then she's missing a couple files. So she, says, is there anything we can do about this? I said, well, give me the laptop, like I said originally, and I'll pull the thing out and I'll try and recover your data. And so sure enough, that was the ultimate end result. And she wound up buying the time capsule and having me recover the data from the MacBook Air.
Jeez.
And, and it's one of these things where I really I had to kind of bite my tongue to like not say, I told you so, and it wasn't like an I told you so kind of situation. It was more like, it would have been in your best interest to have taken my advice. This is what I do every day. I give people advice that I think is right for them, and I'm not doing that to sell a time capsule. I get no benefit from that. I just really think that you should have a backup. And, it played out like she luckily didn't lose any data, but it was just a lot more of a saga than it needed to be. It would have been so much easier if she just had the time capsule set up from the beginning.
Wow. And in the end, she listened to you. But
yeah, right.
It took a lot.
It took a lot, and I felt vindicated at the end. But it was just one of these things where all along I had to kind of like be really careful about how I explained. Like, well, Mozy's fine, but as I mentioned to you a few months ago, Time Machine would have been. I had to kind of like step very lightly around all this, and all that extra effort, coming from me or from us as consultants, like to really try to just do what's right for the client and just sort of convince them that that's the right thing for them,
Right.
Man.
Not a waste of effort.
Speaking of water spills, the big three for me is I love when they say, where they express to you how much water spilled on the keyboard, or they'll say, but I turned it off right away. And it's like, this isn't a phone. It's like pretty much, it's compromised with water. It's pretty much game over. Right. Or they'll say, well, it kind of works.
Right.
It kind of works.
Can
you fix it? Can you fix it?
Put the laptop in a bowl of rice.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, and I can't think of a really good analogy, because you talk about like taking a radio and throwing it in the bathtub, and they kind of maybe sort of understand that a little bit. It just stops working. There's no turning back here. Apple's going to, at the very least, or someone else, replace your logic board. I mean, the only saving grace I ever saw was with the old MacBook Pros when the whole top plate would come off, and underneath the keyboard was that black vapor barrier. And so sometimes when those MacBook Pros would get compromised with liquid, it was just a matter of replacing the whole top assembly, and they would magically come back to life. And you could see if no water had penetrated onto the logic board. But the way they're built now, it's over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has that been your experience? I mean, there's no middle ground there.
Yeah, completely. I mean, you have to be really lucky if you spill it anywhere near a system. It's going to climb and sort of find its way inside the machine. Yeah, it's going to migrate inside for sure. And once it's in there, it's, machine may not shut off right away, but, I mean, unless you shut it down and take the bottom off and pull the battery out and hope for the best, and that's assuming it's clear water. If it's anything that leaves any kind of residue, like especially something acidic like a soda, or coffee with milk or tea with honey or something like that, you forget it.
Or they'll say only the T and the Q and the A don't work. Can you fix it? Really? Because those are the keys I can fix. That's great news.
Right. Yeah. Are you sure it's not the G? Just as long as it's not the G,
Or you have the machine and you have this 20-minute discussion with them on the phone before you ever see sight of the machine, and then somewhere out much later in the conversation it comes out well, we did spill a little bit of water on it.
Yeah.
Oh, and we did bring it to the Apple store, where they're just trying to game you somehow.
Right.
Do I sound bitter?
Yeah.
I don't mean to.
No more than usual. It's all right.
I know we have to avoid making this just a vent session, but I think that's healthy sometimes. I mean, we deal with this stuff on a daily basis, and you're right. They're trying to game you. What? How could that possibly go well if we're not forthcoming about what actually happened to this thing?
I sometimes tell them the truth will set you free.
Alan made a great point in the chat. I'm really impressed sometimes with our colleagues here, and Kim agreed. If you make somebody sign off, like I had recommended, you really need to have a time machine backup here, whether it's a time capsule or something else. And Alan made the point, if you get the client to sign off on the fact that you told them this and that they've declined it, that it's their responsibility if this comes back to bite them. Not only does that protect you, but it really actually drives the point home that this is not something you're doing as a sales pitch. It's really something that you take seriously. I think that's a really good point that Alan made in the chat.
Yeah, it gives them pause.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you guys carry around papers with all these different things to sign? I mean, I don't.
No.
I need to get better about this, about contracts and letters of engagement and that sort of thing, and these waivers.
Yeah, I mean, you can do digital signatures too. I don't know if you can do something like that. But yeah, we have a couple of different forms that we might make people sign depending on, something like that, by the way, which is a backup.
We interviewed Justin Escar a while back. He has that Sign My Pad app and magnetic pen as well.
Yeah, that's one way to go. Bust out your iPad and say, sign here.
Right.
Sign your life away for not backing up.
Right, exactly.
So back in the days when we were in File Vault 1 and you really didn't have any good whole disk encryption for the Mac, I used to be a pretty good supporter of PGP, whole disk encryption, before it was purchased by Symantec. And so, there were a number of legal offices and mostly attorneys that I got them to purchase this product. And so one of these attorneys was having trouble with his Mac, and he went out and he bought a new MacBook Pro, and I met with him today, and we had a PGP encrypted disk that we couldn't get to boot, and I pulled out the drive and couldn't use the recovery, the PGP recovery disk. So they have several images you could burn, and you could try to get access. And we knew the password. And so once again, the MacBook Air came to the rescue, where I downloaded an earlier version of PGP whole disk PGP disk desktop. version, I think 9.9, loaded it onto this MacBook Air running 10.6.8, and hooked up this encrypted drive via USB cables and got the drive to mount. So I couldn't do any copy off of it because of the I was using one of those Weeby Tech. What do you call them, Joe? I know you have one.
Drive dock or combo
drive dock, right? And so I was trying to initially do some sort of an image of it, and I couldn't get it to image. So the best I could do was just grab his user folder, copy it to the MacBook Air, and then from there I just manually moved all his data. And luckily, he didn't have a lot of data. He had probably just under 50 gigs of data that he had to move over to the new machine. So it had a happy ending, but yeah, those can be a real pain. I had another advertising client, guy owns a company, and same sort of thing. We had him do whole disk encryption because he was doing a lot of international traveling, and he had trouble with his Mac and couldn't get it to mount. And I fought with that for a long time. But both of those I was finally able to access. But potentially a big problem. But another point to be made, just having some of these old legacy machines around, or having old legacy software, where you don't throw it out, you put it on a Drobo or you put it on some sort of external drive, and you can pull up these programs again, because you never know when you're going to need them. And once again, it helped out.
Yeah, that's what people hire us for, is to have the right tools around and have the capability to kind of deal with any eventuality.
I had a consultant that I knew that used to go around to clients and never bring any kind of laptop or discs with him or anything like that. And finally, the one client, I worked with him on a couple of gigs and stuff, and they just said, that's like a handyman not coming with a tool bag. It's like, how do you show up and not have the right tools to accomplish your task?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, just to speak to that, I mean, what you guys said, it's exactly right. And having, like Jerry, your older system so that you can navigate through older operating systems or older software, it's really important, because you run across those clients that need that.
Right, and nobody wants a big MacBook Pro, with a G or a Power Mac G5 sitting in their office. So there's something to be said about maybe picking up a G4 laptop on a PowerBook on the cheap, or a first gen MacBook Air that's capable of running some of the earlier Intel software, and those are nice economy pieces that you could sort of store away, and they're not occupying a big footprint in your office. So I think that's a interesting point to be made too, that you don't have to have these big honking machines lying around. You can do it really in a very streamlined way with just some portables.
I had to get a storage unit to put all my old junk.
Mine goes in the Mac Museum, and then I can, pull it off the shelf if I need access to one.
Oh, I need a favor from you, by the way. I'll ask you after the show.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
He's got some Newton files that he needs.
Yeah. Oh man, a Newton would be very cool for my Mac Museum. I don't have one of those. Those were pretty neat. Those were ahead of their time. I've got my old cell phones though. I have some kind of oh man, I don't know, like some kind of flip phone. Then I have a Sony Ericsson, like what do you call it, like a candy bar phone. And then I have my Palm Trio 700p, my first smartphone, and then from there it was the iPhone. And do you remember when the iPhone came out and it just it actually worked and it didn't need to be rebooted every day? I just found that amazing. Like, it synced. I could actually have my calendar with me. Yeah, granted it was USB only, but that was everything. Everything was USB only at the time.
Right.
It was amazing. So I just look back at that Palm 700p, and I remember just rebooting that thing every single day, multiple times a day. It was that's when I realized that these smartphones were really computers, actually.
Yeah.
It really Apple changed everything in 2007. But I digress.
Joe, did you want to?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sam. Joe, did you want to speak a little bit to the really nice newsletter that we got from you a couple of weeks ago, where you had said that you had changed your rates? And I thought the way you approached it and the way it came across was very, very well done. And
Thank you. I worked hard on it. I'd love to talk about it if you guys want to get to that. I think because we should stay on track here. Timing wise. So I've been doing this for over 10 years overall, and my company's been in business for about 9 years, a little over 9 years. And when I started out, originally I was working for another Apple specialist in town, and that's where I kind of learned the ropes, and decided after about a year and a half working for them that I'd go out on my own and start my company. And I realized that I was kind of making a big leap and wasn't sure if anybody would want to hire me, as an individual who was brand new, doing this individually, versus hiring one of the established companies. So I basically really undercut the rates of the going rate locally. And, I'm not sure if I should really speak to the actual numbers. I mean, I don't really have a problem doing it. I think it's actually easier to talk about it in specific numbers. So back then, that was about 10 years ago. And the company I was working for was charging $125 an hour locally. And, of course, that's gone up a little bit, over the years. And when I started out, I undercut that quite a bit. I went down to $75 an hour, and I thought that was a good discount, because I realized that basically it was just me. Whereas when I was with the company, in theory, I had, the backing of a company, and I had several people I could call on if I was on site and I needed help. And that's why the client was paying a higher rate, was because even though they were hiring me to come on site for that company, at the higher rate, they were also getting the backing of a company. So I undercut that, and I charged $75 an hour when I first started out on my own, just to kind of test the waters. And sure enough, people would hire me. Started off with just business cards out there, posted up around the town basically, and got enough of a business to keep going. So I raised my rate after probably, I want to say maybe a year or two, to $100 an hour. So I went up $25, and then after probably another year or two, I went up to $125, and I felt good about finally being at parity with the company I had left behind 4 or 5 years prior, and that was sort of the going rate. And of course, they had probably been raising their rates in the meantime as well. And some businesses around here charge even we're charging quite a bit more than that. But that was kind of right in the middle. And so I was finally on par with the going rate. And then, so about 5 years ago, I raised my rate for the last time prior to just this month or last month. And I raised my rate back then to $150. That was 5 years ago. I started charging $150 an hour. And the timing there was not ideal. It was, let's see, what was that? That would have been it was the summer of 2008. And so it was basically like right at the beginning of a pretty big downturn in the economy. And so, I kept with my plan. That was the plan that I had. I was going to be raising my rate at that time, and I just stuck with it. I figured if I don't raise it now, I'm not going to be raising it for a while. So what's the difference? I need to raise it and just take a little bit of a leap here. And then I didn't raise it for 5 years, and I'm not sure why, but I just felt comfortable at the rate I was charging. But as I mentioned in my newsletter, I'll read you the first two paragraphs, basically. For over 9 years, CIMAC has provided high-quality Apple technology consulting services at an exceptional value. Since our last rate increase, we've expanded our practice to better serve you with a convenient office space, a staff of 3, higher availability, and new group classes. As we've grown, we've maintained the same competitive rates while continually increasing our value. So I say that not to sort of toot my own horn here, but just to give listeners an example of maybe how to sort of pitch this type of thing. Because, what I was trying to do is demonstrate what's happened in the last 5 years, why I feel like a higher rate is justified. So I boosted my rate just a couple weeks ago to $175. Not a huge increase, but sort of consistent with the pattern I've been increasing my rate at dollar-wise. And, I feel that it's justified, again, because we have much bigger overhead now. We have an office space, we have, staff, we have people answering the phone, that kind of thing. And as I mentioned, there are group classes, higher availability. So there's costs associated with offering, services and offering better services. And so I felt like those costs needed to be accounted for, and the value that I was providing needed to be paid for. So that's justified my rate increase, basically. So I sort of spun it that way. I basically said, we haven't done this in 5 years. Here's what's happened in the last 5 years, and this is why we're raising our rates. And what I did was I said that the the new rates would go into effect immediately for new clients. And that's always probably the easiest part of the puzzle. When a new client calls and says, who are you? What do you do? What do you charge? That's when you can start to get really comfortable saying that new rate, because they're either going to say okay or not. And every single one of them so far has said okay. And it just has not been an issue. And I don't know why. I think in my mind, it's always like, I feel like it's a risk. I feel like I'm not sure if they're going to go for it. And yet when you think about it, like if they're already willing to pay, $150, let's say, just to throw a number out there, why wouldn't they be willing to pay, say, $175? It's not double, it's a little bit higher, but they're interested in services, and they're interested in high quality services. So it turned out to be perfectly palatable for a lot of people. And so then I said to thank our current clients for their ongoing support, we would honor the old rate throughout the rest of this season, the fall. And as of December 21st, the new rate goes into effect for all clients. And then I also offered a deal where they could buy 3 hours prepaid at the old rate. So that if they don't need us over the next 3 months or so, they can still buy some hours at the old rate. And they would also get a free half hour if they did that. So if they prepay right now and decide to use those hours, over the next year or something like that, they pay for 3 hours, they get the old rate, and they get a free half hour as well. So that's kind of how I presented it in my newsletter. And I mentioned at the end again, just to kind of drive it home again, I said that as CIMAC approaches the significant milestone of 10 years in business, I'm humbled with gratitude for my clients. You empower me to be what I enjoy being, a technology geek. Thank you. And I said, here's to consulting together over the next decade. Just a way of saying basically, hey, listen, I'm doing this rate increase. I've been doing this for 10 years. I think that's a big deal. I think you should all sort of, understand that this is a big milestone, and this rate increase is in that context. And I really hope you stick with me. I'm not sure you're going to stick with me. I hope you do. So that's kind of the way I laid it all out.
As Alan said, very nice wording. I mean, it really was worded well.
Thank you.
So even though, like you had made the comparison that the jump from 150 to 175 wasn't this huge hurdle, still in your own mind, and justifiably so, it in us always assessing what's fair and reasonable to charge our clients, it appears maybe in our own head as a little bit significantly bigger number. So would you say, I mean, and you did it very elegantly, and you're kind of over that hurdle, but would you say going forward, or maybe in hindsight, it would have been better to maybe creep it up a little bit so that it wasn't as I mean, again, it's not a huge, it's $25 is not a huge impact, but do you think you may do that in the future? Is this sort of like ease it, not make the big jumps, or not stay at the same rate for 5 years?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, I had raised it kind of pretty steadily over the first 5 years, and then with three rate increases over that time, and then without a rate increase for the next 5 years. So yeah, in retrospect, I sort of wish I had raised it 2 years ago, and then raised it again this year or something like that. And maybe it would have even been the same increment. I mean, I don't know. I think that it's still, I feel I offer these services every day. I feel like it's still a good value, even at the current price. I certainly don't think that I'm overcharging. So I feel like I could have even charged, I could have increased it again, a few years ago, and then increased it again now, even by the same increment. But if I had clients on a monthly retainer, or what are we calling it? Managed services sort of model that we've talked about in several episodes here. I would feel much more comfortable about saying, okay, hey, listen, it's January 1st. The rates are going up by $10 a computer, or $10 a head, or whatever the case may be, or $5 or whatever it is. Which in a, is presumably in that kind of scenario, you'd have a better billing system where you could just literally just make that tweak, or maybe you give them a 3-month sort of heads up, or I don't know what, but you raise it up, or it's $1 a month or something like that. Mm-hmm. But there's just too much overhead with doing more frequent, smaller raises. like in this case, we have to now track like which clients are paying which rate. You certainly don't want to like accidentally quote a new client the lower rate and then have to say, oh, that was a mistake. You weren't supposed to be paying the low rate. You're supposed to be paying more now from next time. Or so it's just awkward. So you have to be really careful about that. You have to track it.
But I think you'll always have some of that. I mean, I know I do that myself, where there are some clients that get a little bit more special, a little bit of special consideration. So what I frequently do is just to make sure that when I'm doing my billing, I'll go back and I'll refer in my billing system to what they were billed out last time. And if we haven't done work in 12 months, I can easily sort of bring them to the new price point. Because it's not as big a leap. So. But I think even if even just standardizing across the board with pricing, even if you had everybody, I think there will still be those edge cases where they're getting a little bit of a 10% discount or something like that.
Right.
And do you mind me asking if did anyone take you on that prepaid deal, or did anyone drop off? If you're comfortable talking about any of that.
Sure. Yeah, we did have. Some decent initial interest. I think we had maybe like 5 or 6 clients take us up on the prepaid 3 hours. So
that's significant,
which was good. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's great to have a little bit of a cash infusion there, and and that really shows like obviously they're reaffirming their sort of commitment. They're sticking with us even though the rate's going to go up. They're seeing the value of paying at the old rate now. And in fact, it's funny. Some of them have used those hours up. So they like prepaid. They got the half hour, and they've now used all that time up. And as far as anybody dropping off, I didn't get a single email response or phone response or anything of clients that were against it in any way or that pushed back at all. So that was really. Kind of a relief. I mean, I wasn't sure. I thought, well, if I might lose a few people, that's fine. And of course, I may have lost a few people, and I may just not know it yet. But nobody really pushed back, and spoke up about it. So that was good too. So I don't know if that's a sort of finger in the air about, or a litmus test there, but if anyone's thinking of raising their rates and it's time to do so, it's at least in this area, like I said, I did not get any pushback, and it was so far so good. And we also introduced a couple new services, as I sort of indicated earlier in the email. I then went on to describe like group classes, for example, which is another benefit of now having an office space and having expanded in this way. We have a little bit of a space where we have a projector and a wall to project on, and we have a little bit of space for like 3 small tables, so we can fit like 4 to 8 people here. And we had 6 or 7 people here a couple weeks ago for our first group class, and the way we're doing that is the classes are 90 minutes each. It's a 60-minute presentation with like live demos and kind of a slideshow, like keynote presentation, followed by a 30-minute Q&A. And that went over really well, and they're already interested in coming back for like a level 2 class, just basic kind of like tips and things about making the most of your system. So group classes have been great. We're pricing that at $100 per student. So essentially our break even on that is like 2 or 3 students. And so if we have, 3 students interested, we'll hold the class. If not, we may say, let's bump it back to another date or something like that. And if we do 8 students, we're doing pretty well for the hour and a half that we're offering that.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
I know that break-even number for the classes is always tough because we do this, with our training center. If you get a couple classes in a row where you don't make that minimum number, it's a tough thing. Then you kind of got to decide, well, maybe I should run it because these people are eventually not going to want to keep getting pushed back on a later date or something like that.
Right.
So I've had that happen to us a couple of times.
Yeah, and I thought about things like we had this one client who was just really awesome. She brought together a group of her friends and like arranged the whole thing and figured out timing and stuff like that. I mean, she was like she was like an angel in this process. And I thought about like offering just using that model, offering to a client if they bring whatever the number is, 3 or 4 of their friends or more, they get either a significant discount or like a free class or something like that, just to encourage people to kind of like, hey, you tell your friends, you sell it for me, and in fact, the amazing thing, this is even better. We booked like 3 appointments with new clients that we we had never worked with, who came to the class thanks to this client introducing them to the group classes that we were offering, because it's a really sort of relatively cheap way to get introduced to us and to get some value from us. And then they booked an appointment on the spot for like help with their Wi-Fi networks and sorting out iCloud, those types of things.
So that's the big payback there. That these classes are really a way for you to leverage new clients. So.
It's a marketing opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
So I made sure we inserted some like little hints in there, like if you're this is the way it's supposed to work. This is supposed to sync, and you're supposed to be able to add this and have it show up there, and iCloud. If it's not working that way, then that means there's something wrong, and we can help you with that. We can fix that for you. So talk to us after class, that kind of thing. Dropping those hints in there. Mm-hmm. But even sort of a bigger deal to me is this idea of quick fixes. That was my second service that I introduced there was quick fixes, which was kind of inspired by Alan's, what did he call it? Personal support. So it's like a monthly charge where you pay per person per month, and you have access to us, unlimited number of brief consultations by phone, email, or remote support. So you can call us up, pick our brain. You can call us up and say, this doesn't work. Can you connect remotely and fix it? Or you can email us a question and say, this is what happened. What do I do? And so the idea is that's $25 per person per month. And then there's different discounts for, like families or offices up to a certain size, that kind of thing. But that's an answer to the age-old problem of, just as I mentioned in a previous show, death by 1,000 5-minute emails, or I had this today. It's like somebody calls and says, I put a CD in and it's not showing up in the external burner. Well, okay. Is it connected? Yeah, it's connected. Is it turned on? Yeah, it's turned on. Did you look in the Finder? Yeah. Okay, let's try turning it off and turning it on again. Right? The IT crowd. Sam loves that one.
I do.
And sure enough, that fixed it. So I spent 5 or 10 minutes on the phone just talking them through a really simple fix, and I can't see justifying like billing for that, sending the email with the invoice. I mean, but I should, I really should. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm available to you when you call. Why shouldn't I get paid for that? So I'd love to be getting paid by that client, $25 a month to just do as many of those as they want. I don't care. They can call me every day if they want for that price, just because at least it's something. At least I'm getting paid something for those quick fixes. Versus the other new thing I introduced was, $50 for per incident for like email or phone support, or like a very quick remote support, maybe. But again, I can't see sending somebody a $50 bill for that,
Yeah. Is it because of the number, or just, $50 for like a few minutes on the phone?
I guess. I mean, and sending them an invoice for $25 for even 10, 5 or 10 minutes on the phone.
Yeah.
Can I send all my clients quick questions to you?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're going to do it for free.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. I struggle with this constantly because I feel like, clients get used to this idea that they can just call us in the office and that Ashley's going to do a sort of first line of defense. Have you tried restarting, like that kind of thing? And then they can get through to me very quickly if it goes beyond that. And I'm available. I mean, I'm not always available, but if I am, hey, I save them about 45 minutes on the phone with Apple, or, an hour and a half trip to and from the Apple store. Yeah, I say, it's like I'm providing a value. It's like it takes me 5 minutes, but then again, it only took them 5 minutes to get their solution, whereas what might have taken 20 to 90 minutes otherwise. Why shouldn't I get paid for that, right?
Yeah.
Well, it is because it becomes a double-edged sword. Because the more they do it, the more they're going to sort of know that you're there as a resource. So then they're going to tap you even further. So. Absolutely, you deserve remuneration for this, because you're getting them into this habit of reaching out to your company. So absolutely.
So I guess what I thought about doing after this one happened today, that was, again, really simple, but still sort of like an perfect example of one of these. I thought, well, I guess the thing to do is to like send the invoice, showing the charge, showing a like discount or sort of credit or something, netting out to zero, but sort of advising the client using that invoice as the sort of, just showing, just as a demonstration, advising them that, they would be charged in the future for this. This is now a billable service. We're happy to provide this service, but it's billable. We also offer this quick fixes alternative where you can pay a flat rate per month and get service as an alternative. But this one's free. This one's on us. But the next one is billable.
Or you simply, you just simply sign them up for the service. By billing them out, you'll give, and if they say, well, I didn't expect to pay for this, or you could say, well, we've signed you up for our quick fix program, and now you can tap us again if you need to.
That's a really interesting idea. Like actually sending them an invoice for $25 for the first month, and like they can pay it and then they're signed up, or they can whatever they can.
Yeah, they're in the club. Yeah, absolutely. I would do that.
Interesting idea. Well, that's helpful. I got to think about that. That's another idea.
If anything, this podcast has helped us all figure out different ways to run our businesses. I mean, as a selfish notion, I mean, all the feedback that we receive from people that we've talked to and all that stuff, it's really been interesting to see how it's affected each of our businesses.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it definitely is why I did that whole quick fixes thing. I haven't had anybody sign up for it voluntarily yet, but I think you're right. I think the next step is to sort of like push it, in that way. But that's my favorite topic, is like business stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's a generosity of the community of the listeners that we have. I mean, the fact that, we had other people join us and share with us their experiences, and that just helps broaden your view and your scope, so that it's not just the three of us talking. It's a much larger conversation, and that always helps. So we'd love to hear from you. So please keep the feedback coming, and any ideas for shows or any potential guests who you think might be a nice fit for us to talk to. I know that coming up next week we're going to be speaking with Data Robotics. Is that right, guys?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's right. That'll come out a week from today.
And we're going to be talking to Synology, but there's many, many other topics we can address. So we're wide open here.
Definitely. And thank you all again in the chat today for being there. We really appreciate your support, and tell your friends, tell our colleagues, get more people to sign up to our podcast subscription, and to be here on a weekly basis like you all, because it's really great to see your familiar faces in the chat as we're discussing this.
And if you didn't hear last week's show, we had a great conversation with product manager from Promise, Elaine Kwok. So that was on the second half of last week's show, and I believe we may put that into the feed as just a standalone download. So go back and listen to that, because there's a lot of great information of what Promise Technologies has in store with the release of the Mac Pro. And they're going to be absolutely ready to hit the ground running when that product hits the marketplace. So they're going to be a great partner for us all in the future.
Jerry, you're not going to plug my hard drive MacGyvering last week either.
That's right. Yeah, they gotta listen up.
Yeah, guys, listen to the episode. It was definitely a great interview, and I'm getting the sense from reading the tea leaves that any day now we may have a new Mac Pro out there in the wild, and Promise will be there alongside that. So check it out. And Sam, what were you going to say?
I have no idea. I think I was going to say I'm hungry.
Excellent. You guys, this has been a fun show.
Yeah, good stuff, guys. I like the war stories we all shared tonight. Good ones.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, stay tuned for more great episodes here. Visit us at commandcontrolpower.com, and make sure you subscribe to our feed in iTunes. The link is on the website. And are we going to do our Twitter handles? Is that the fashion of the day?
That's our sign off.
I'm Cymac LLC on Twitter.
Jerry.
MacWorks LLC.
I am Sam Valencia.
Don't you
See you
mean
next week.
I am San Valencia?
I know. I never know how to word that.
Take care, guys. See you next week.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?